a little bit about Daniel, and we kind of been skipping back and forth a little bit. And this morning we're going to be in Daniel chapter 3, and we're going to be talking a little bit more about Daniel. And I realize, we're going to try to stay true to this text, right? That's what we try to do, is try to stay true to the text. And sometimes when you do that, the message, I don't know, for some people, maybe it just doesn't apply to them. I don't know. Maybe they're just in a different situation or different thing or whatever. And this morning might be one of those times. I don't know. This morning might be one of those times where you're sitting here and you're going, this message, I don't know that really applies to me, right? I mean, if you're someone that every part of your life right now is going great, and your life is pretty much perfect, and you have no issues whatsoever, and things, then this morning, this message might not be for you, right? It might not be for you, and you might be like, oh yeah, my life is wonderful, right? But if you've been struggling in any way, like in any way, shape, or form, maybe even praying to God for something and feeling like maybe God's just not really answering, then this message might be exactly what you're looking for. This might be exactly for you this morning. And I think if we look at it and we're honest, right? Some people, they have some big problems in their lives, right? There's some people, some of us have big problems in our lives and big struggles they're going through even right now and things like that. And other people, it might just be these ongoing problems, right? It's maybe not necessarily a big problem, but maybe there's just some ongoing problems in their lives. And maybe it's just that more like, life's okay, but it's not great, right? It's my job's not great, or my finances aren't great. My marriage isn't great. There's just these little things that aren't going so well, and I don't know what to do about it. And I've been praying about it, and I've been struggling trying to figure it out, and those things. And I feel like maybe God's not hearing me or whatever. And we're just going through these things in life. And if we're really honest, I think there's really three types of people. If we're truly honest, I think there's three types of people. There are those that are going into a trial in life. There are those that are in the middle of a trial in life. And there are those that are coming out of a trial, right? I think that's kind of like the three types of people. And I know you're probably saying, well, Pastor Patrick, thank you so much for the encouragement this morning, right? It doesn't leave a lot of room for much else, right? But let's be honest, that's really how life is most of the time, right? That's really when you think about people in general, they're either getting ready, they're going into some type of trial, they're in the middle of it, or they're just kind of coming out of something. And so, when you think about that, I think it's very appropriate to think that that's kind of how most people are, right? They're doing this. And Peter in the New Testament called the difficulties in life fiery trials, right? In 1 Peter 4:12, it says this, it says, "Beloved, do not be surprised at the fiery trial," right? When it comes upon you to test you, as though something strange were happening to you. We shouldn't be surprised when these types of things happen, right? When these fiery trials come into our lives to test us. We shouldn't be surprised by that. And that's what he's saying, right? Some people, right now, this time of year even, especially the winter when it's cold outside, you may be stuck in your house a lot more, all of those types of things. So a lot of people can get, depressed or discouraged. And there may be a lot of people that kind of feel that way even this morning, right? That it's just like, man, it's miserable outside. The weather's terrible. I know my wife always talks about how she loves the sun, right? The sun is like her energy, right? She gets her energy from the sun. And so like when it's winter and it's just overcast and gloomy and that kind of stuff, she's like, I just don't feel quite the same as I do in the middle of summertime when the sun's bright and shining, right? And it's true, right? You think about people in like Alaska and some places like that or whatever, where like there's times of darkness even in these certain areas where it's dark most of the year or whatever, and that kind of stuff. There's people that live there, and they talk about the suicide rate being higher in those times stuff, and people get just depressed for all kinds of reasons. And so I think there's a lot of people that could be depressed or discouraged even this morning, right? They may feel like their faith is being tested in some type of a trial, right? They may be going through something that's really kind of testing their faith. In 1 Peter 1:7 says, "These trials will show that your faith is genuine," right? These trials will show that your faith is genuine. It is being tested as fire tests and purifies gold. though your faith is far more precious than mere gold. So when your faith remains strong through the trials, it will bring you much praise and glory and honor on the name when Jesus Christ is revealed to the whole world, right? So like we go through these trials in life and stuff, and he's saying these trials will show that your faith is genuine, right? That it's being tested. Just like, fire when it tests and it purifies gold, right? And it says that, our faith is far more precious than mere gold. Right? Our faith is so precious. It's a precious thing, and it's tested at times. And today we're going to continue this series that we've been in the book of Daniel, and we've been looking at Daniel and his friends, right? We've talked a little bit about Daniel and his friends, and here's the thing. What we're looking at this morning in chapter 3, they're about to face the test of a lifetime, right? They're about to face the test of a lifetime. They're gonna literally face a fiery trial, right? In the form of a fiery furnace. Like it's the test of a lifetime for these individuals. This is going to be the largest test they're probably ever going to go through. And what we're going to discover is that a faith that has been tested is a faith that can be trusted. A faith that has been tested is a faith that can be trusted. That's really what it comes down to, right? Our faith is tested at times, and there's a reason for that. It's because a faith that is tested is a faith that can be trusted. And let's review where we are in Daniel, okay? Let's think about kind of where we are when we get to chapter 3 and stuff, and kind of what we talked about week 1 and things too, about King Nebuchadnezzar, right? The nasty old King Nebuchadnezzar, the most powerful man in the Babylonian Empire. Right? He's the king, he's the most powerful man, and he's conquered Judah, and he's ordered the capture and the slavery of the people there, and he's ordered that the best and the brightest in Judah be brought to him. And so we have Daniel and his 3 friends, Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego, right? Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego. Rakshak and Benny. That's what I'm going to call them from here on out. All right? So we've got Rakshak and Benny. All right? And Rakshak and Benny, they were taken away from their homes, and they were forced into the Babylonian culture, right? They were brought into Babylon. They were under the service of the king. They were ordered to do all kinds of things. And we talked about a little bit of a test that happened when they first got there with the food and all that kind of stuff, right? And they're in this, and they're trying to indoctrinate them into the Babylonian culture is what they're really trying to do. They want to brainwash them into believing what it is that they believe, and to forget where they came from and what they believed before, so that they would then be able to help rule over the people, which are now mixed from the 2 different areas, right? It's one of the best ways to conquer an area, right? When you go in, you conquer the area, and if you can convert as many people as possible to your religion, to your faith, to your point of view, then you can it makes it much easier to rule those people if you can do that. And that's exactly what they're trying to do here. And so King Nebuchadnezzar, right, this king that's the most powerful man, whatever, he's got a really small ego, just a little one, right? Just a little tiny ego. And so what he does is he makes this gold statue of himself, right? You think of this a gold statue, you see things in parks or whatever, like a little statue that sits on a base or whatever, it's this little thing or whatever. No, he doesn't go quite like that, right? He goes a little bit bigger. In fact, the statue was 90 feet tall. It's a 90-foot tall gold statue. It was 9 feet wide. It was as tall as an 8-story building. Like, think about that. That's a big statue, right? Made of gold. Right? He's got this giant statue. So obviously he had a little bit of an ego, right? Just a little bit. He builds this statue and he places it there, and then he commands that he's like, okay, we're building this so that people can worship it. And so every government leader, advisor, judge, magistrate, whatever, they all must come to the dedication of this statue. And they all are there, and this is what we hear. Chapter 3, verses 4 through 6 says, "Then the herald loudly proclaimed, 'Nations and peoples of every language, this is what you are commanded to do.'" Like, this is what you're commanded to do. "As soon as you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all other kinds of music, you must fall down and worship the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up." You must fall down and worship this statue that he has set up. Whoever does not fall down and worship will immediately be thrown into the blazing furnace. It doesn't get much more serious than that, does it? Like if you could put yourself in that moment, that's a pretty serious moment that you're standing there witnessing, right? And you're standing before this giant statue, and you got this king who thinks maybe a little bit too much of himself, right? And he's got a little bit of an ego, and he's on a power trip, and he's demanding this, and he's saying, hey, when you hear the music, when the band starts to play, you're all going to fall down on your face, and you're going to bow down and worship this statue. And if you don't, I'm going to throw you into the blazing furnace. Okay, right? Like, wow, it just got serious. Like, it just got really, really serious. This is a massive trial. This is a massive test. And remember what we said, right? We said that a faith that has been tested is a faith that can be trusted, right? That's what we're going to look at. And so the king says, bow and worship the statue or you will die. Bow and worship the statue or you will die. So what do you think the crowd did? I mean, if you were there, what do you think you would do? I mean, I could just picture myself there in this sea of people with this king giving this order, and then you hear the music, and I'm going, do I even hesitate? Right? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Like, what would I do in that situation? What would I do? If I really put myself into that situation, what would I do? Daniel 3:7 says, therefore, as soon as they heard the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, and all other kinds of music, the nations and people of every language fell down and worshiped the king of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. So immediately, as soon as they heard it, everybody in this whole sea of people, they just all bow down, right? Instantly. They're like, okay, you heard the man. I don't want to go into the blazing furnace, so I'm bowing down. Regardless of what they thought of the man, regardless of what they thought of the statue, they were going to bow down. What they were actually thinking in their minds during that time, I have no clue. You know, they might have been like, this is ridiculous, but I'm doing it anyway, right? And I'm going to put on a great show because I don't want him thinking I'm not doing it right either because I don't want to take any risk and get thrown into the fire. Right? That's the scene that we see. This giant statue and everybody bowing down, like literally on the ground with their face in the dirt, bowing down to this statue. And then you look around at this sea of people, and their faces on the ground, but then you see these three boys that are just standing there. And you're like, I can just imagine what that would have been like, right? You're like bound down, and you kind of, you close your eyes, you're down, and all of a sudden you look up a little bit, and you're like, dude, I got somebody. Dude, didn't you hear what he said, man? Get down, like, right? Like wouldn't you think that people were around them were probably a little bit like, what are they doing? Like, did they not hear him? Like, they just not understand? Like, what's going on, right? Like, these guys are just standing there. These three boys are just standing there. The other leaders that saw this, they were like, no way, right? Like, we're telling the king. We remember what happened with Daniel in chapter 6, the leaders and stuff, when the decree was made that you weren't allowed to pray to any other god but Nebuchadnezzar. Remember what happened there? And they went and tattled him because they wanted to get him in trouble. I imagine it's probably kind of the same thing here, right? They're like, no way. We're going and telling the king. They're like, oh, great, powerful King Nebuchadnezzar, those Jewish boys, those Jewish kids that you promoted, they're not worshiping you, right? They're not worshiping you. They're not doing it. And the king, what does he do? He gets furious. It says that he was enraged by this, right? He gets furious and he summons the boys to him. And he basically gives them a second chance, really. He explains to them, like, I can just imagine him, like, really mad, and he's just going, okay, guys, like, I don't know, maybe you didn't hear me. Maybe you didn't know what I was talking about. Maybe you weren't close enough to the furnace to see what it really looks like, right? Like, maybe, I don't know what it is, but here's the thing. I'm going to give you one more chance. I'm going to allow you to do it one more time. So when you hear the music, bow down, right? Bow down. If you don't bow down and worship the statue, you're going to die. That's what he says. In Daniel 3:16 through 17, it says that Shadrach and Benny replied to him, King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves. We don't need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, I want you to look at their faith here for a second, right? Like, look at their faith. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it. And he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. right? Like, they're like, we don't even have to defend ourselves against you. Why? Because our God is able. Because our God is able. He's able to deliver us from this. We believe that. We fully believe that. That's why we're still standing, because we believe that he's able to deliver us from that. Pause for a moment and just let that sink in. Let that sink in for a minute. Their lives are literally on the line, right? Their lives are literally on the line, and they refuse to compromise their faith even in the face of death. They refuse to compromise their faith even in the face of death. It's pretty amazing when you really think about it and you stop to think about what they were really going through at that time. What that really would have been like at that moment to be able to stand up straight when everybody else is bowing down. Think about how easy it would have been to rationalize doing what was safe and easy. Right? Think about how easy it would have been to just do what everybody else is doing, right? You can fake it, right? I'm just going to fake it, right? I'll bow, but I won't really worship the idol, right? I'm just going to bow, but I'm not really worshiping the idol. I got my fingers crossed, right? You know, I'm not. It doesn't count because whatever. Like you can fake it, right? Or you know what? I'll worship just this once, and then I'll ask for forgiveness, right? I'll ask for forgiveness, and God will understand. Right? He'll understand. Like he'll see the situation I'm in, and he'll know that I didn't have any other choice, right? Like this is my only choice. I mean, what am I supposed to do? Like, if we die, who's going to help all these people, right? If we die, what's going to happen to all these people? And so, like, you can realize this in so many ways, but they refuse to compromise their faith, even in the face of death. Well, let's be real. Let's be real. It's likely very hard for us to imagine what that really would have been like. To face a fiery furnace because you're standing strong for your faith. I don't think there's many people that really can honestly say, I know exactly how that feels. I've been there, done that. I don't know. There are probably people around the world, absolutely. There are places in this world where there are people that are persecuted for their faith in ways that we can't even imagine. That meet in secret little rooms with candles lit and stuff like that because they don't want to turn lights on because they're afraid they'll get caught and thrown in jail or maybe even killed or whatever, and they have to do those things. I personally have never been in a situation like that. The closest thing I ever came to that was when I was in Peru one time, and I was going with we went on a missionary thing there, and we ended up going out to this place, and I was supposed to preach at a church that was in the middle of nowhere in this place called Alto Trujillo. And Trujillo is kind of this desert area, and this place called Alto Trujillo is out in the middle, on the outskirts of it. It's very much desert. It's desolation. It's really rough. And I think maybe I shared this maybe a little bit before, but like, the night before, the pastor came to me, and this was like the first day that we were there, and he said, hey, tomorrow morning, I'm going to be outside. I need you to meet me out there around 7 o'clock. We're going to be leaving and going to Alto Trujillo, and you're going to preach at the church there. I'm like, okay, great. And so we get out there that next morning, and he's like standing there, and there's these taxi cabs coming up, and he's talking to them and stuff like that, and then the taxi cab's driving away. And he's talking to the next one, and they're driving away. And I've got this little guy, Pastor Chapa, who's about 80 years old, and he's about this tall, and I've got a girl that's with me who's about 18 years old. She's about this tall. They're both Peruvian. She's my translator. He's the pastor that's just going with us. And so we're standing out there, and I said to the translator, I said, do you know what's going on? And she's like, well, he's having trouble finding a taxi. I'm like, I've seen like 5 come by. I'm not sure how it's too hard to find one when there's like 5 of them come by, and he's talking to all of them. And she's like, well, he's having trouble getting them to take us where we need to go. They don't want to go there because that area is known for people that will rob you and steal from you and all kinds of stuff, and it's not a safe area, so they don't want to take us there. And I'm like, like, wait a second, what are you talking about, right? Like, how bad really is this? And of course, the day before when he told me about this, he said, hey, I want you to make sure you put on you're going to be preaching, so put on your dress slacks and put on your polo shirt, make sure you look nice and stuff. And I'm like, okay. And I'm like about a foot taller than everybody else in the whole country, right? And I'm like, so I stand out like a sore thumb. And so I'm like, okay. So finally we get this taxi cab, and he's like, come. And we're like, okay. So we get in and we start driving, and we get going, and I see him and the driver talking quite a bit. And as we're getting closer to where we're supposed to go, it seems like they're getting a little more heated. Like, I don't know, it looks like there's an argument happening. I'm not sure. I don't speak, the language, so I'm kind of like, I'm a little stuck here. I don't really know what they're doing. But the translator's sitting there, she's listening intently, and I'm like, what's going on? And she's like, well, we're going to be getting dropped off here in a minute. I'm like, okay, so we're there. She's like, no. She's like, we're going to have to walk the rest of the way. And I'm like, okay. She's like, it's only about a mile and a half or so, but he won't go any farther than this or whatever, so we're going to have to walk the rest of the way. I'm going, you're dropping me off in the middle of the desert with two people that I stand a foot ahead of. You told me to dress really nice, so I stand out like a sore thumb, and we're going to a place where the taxi cab driver is afraid of getting robbed and killed and everything else, and now you want me to walk through that area to get to the church. And I'm going, oh, Lord. Like, my God is able, right? He's able to protect me, and it was an amazing experience, right? And I remember walking down the streets, though, going, God, I don't know what's going to happen here. I have no clue. Like, if somebody comes up and asks me for my wallet, I'm like, here, take my wallet, take whatever you want. Like, I'm not trying to get hurt here. So, but it was a real situation where I had to put my faith and trust in Jesus and go, you know what? You're going to get me through this. I didn't realize this is what was going to be happening until I'm already in it. But I know that you're going to be with me as I go through this, and I'm okay with that. And so they didn't compromise, right? These guys, you got Shadrach and Benny, and they didn't compromise, and they're faced with this. But I think it's hard for us to really understand what that's like, to imagine what it's really like, to face death because of your faith. It's easy, I think, to write the story off sometimes as just like, okay, it's an Old Testament story, right? Does it really apply to me? Right? Does it really apply to me? It's an Old Testament story. Well, here's the thing. Our faith is tested in so many different ways every single day. Right? Our faith is tested in so many different ways every single day, right? We're faced with a choice to do what's right or do what's easy. We're faced with a choice to do what pleases God or do what pleases people, right? We're faced with the choice to worship God or to give our hearts to a worldly idol, right? We're faced with that kind of stuff every single day. We're faced with the thought of, okay, do I hold my tongue or do I join into the gossip? Right? Do I tell the truth and maybe lose the deal? Do I exaggerate just a little bit to make the sale? Right? Like there's all kinds of things and ways that we're tested on a daily basis. And you go, yeah, okay, I get that. But Pastor Pat, like I'm never going to worship an idol, right? I'm never gonna bow down to an 8-story statue, right? I'm not going to do that. Okay. Well, here's the thing. You say you're never going to worship an idol. What is worship? What is worship? Worship is where you give your time, your heart, and your attention, right? It's where you give your time, your heart, and your attention. And if we're working with that definition, then I think some people, they worship their jobs. That's where they give all their heart. That's where they give all their attention. That's where they give all of their time. Some people worship their bank accounts. Right? It's all about their bank account, all about the money. I got to have the money, right? It's all about that. It's all about the next thing. I got to buy this. I got to get that. I got to have enough in savings. I got to have enough in this. And they begin to basically make that the highest priority in their life is making sure their bank account stays where they want it to be, right? There's people that they seek the approval of other people, and they seek that above everything else. Doesn't matter what it is. They seek that above everything else. They want the approval of other people. It could be our kids. It could be our pets, right? Those things can become idols in our lives where we prioritize them above God, where we prioritize them to the point where we put them above everything else in our lives and we focus on them so much that they become an idol. There are some people that will spend a bunch of money and they'll schedule a chunk of time, and they prioritize this, and they make sure that nothing else could possibly conflict with this, right? So that they can go to a big event somewhere, this big event where they can join in everybody else there. They can join in with them, cheering and screaming and yelling, so that their team can score a touchdown, right? They'll paint their faces, they'll get all dressed up and all kinds of stuff. They wear the right stuff, they go, they participate with everybody else. They're all excited, they're cheering, they're screaming, they're yelling, all this stuff. It's wonderful, right? It's an amazing thing. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with going to a football game. I love going to a football game. But some of those same people call themselves believers, but they won't prioritize going to church. They'll make the time to go to football games. They'll make the time to go to that kind of stuff. They'll make the time to make sure they're at home to watch their game and to cheer and do all that kind of stuff, whatever. But they won't prioritize going to church. They won't prioritize reading their Bible. They won't prioritize the things in life that are going to draw them closer to God. They won't do it. Because those things have become an idol in their life. It's become too much of a priority in their life. And here's the thing. Here's the deal. I need to understand this and to remember this truth, right? If you're committed to serving God, the devil will tempt you to compromise your faith in God. He will tempt you to compromise your faith in some way. If you're committed to God, Satan will tempt you to compromise your faith in him. Absolutely guaranteed. It's going to happen, right? If it hasn't happened to you yet, it's going to happen, right? If you're committed to God, it will happen. So back to our story, right? Let's look again at their faith, right? Daniel 3:17, if we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it. No matter what the problem is that we face, no matter what the problem is that we're going through, the fiery trial that we have in our life or whatever, I sometimes, and I'm guilty of this, I have to continually remind myself at times that my God is able. Right? My God is able. Right? If you get a bad medical report, my God is able to heal. If you have a broken relationship, my God is able to restore. He's able to restore that. Right? If you are struggling financially, my God is able to provide. And I struggle with those things. I remember one time, it was actually in 2020, right? And a lot of things were going crazy at that point, right? And I remember just prior to 2020, the end of the previous year, I was hiking with my son. We were out hunting and stuff, and it was hunting season, and we were going up and down the mountain and things, and I was just like, I'd go like 5 feet, and I'm like, I can't go up this hill. Hold on, buddy. Like, just give me a second. I'm really out of shape, bud. Like, I got to sit down for a minute. And he's like, come on, Dad. Like, what are you doing? Like, can't you get going a little? Can't you go 10 feet at least? Like, let's get up this mountain here. Okay, we're on the mountain in Pennsylvania. We're going up, and he's like laughing at me because I'm so out of shape and everything else. And we get up the top of the mountain and stuff finally. And then I end up going to a doctor's appointment not long after that, and I'm talking to him, and I'm just like, yeah, I'm really out of shape. I'm like, I get really out of breath really fast. Like I'm like literally at home. I go up my set of steps in my house, and by the time I get to the top of the steps, I'm like winded. And he's like, And I see the wheels turning and stuff, and he's like, let me ask you some questions. He asked me some more questions about it, and then the next thing I know, he's like, hey, here's what we're going to do. I don't want you doing any physical exertion at all until I run some tests. And I'm going, huh? Like, well, that doesn't sound good. Like, what's going on? And he's like, no, just no physical exertion whatsoever until we run some tests. He runs some tests and things. Go back to his office. He's like, well, it's what I thought. You have a wide open mitral valve in your heart. And I'm going, that doesn't sound good either. like that's not good. I was like, so what do we do about that? He goes, well, we're going to continue the regimen of, I don't want you doing any kind of physical exertion. Like literally, he's like, I don't want you doing anything. And I'm like, okay, that's not good. I'm thinking, like, what happens if I do? Like, can I walk up the steps? Is that okay? And so my mind is starting to go like, okay, what happens if I do the wrong thing? Am I going to be in big trouble here? All this kind of stuff. So we go and end up, I go to the hospital, and this is 2020, of course, and I remember that day when my wife dropped me off at the hospital. And I say dropped me off at the hospital because it was 2020. She was not allowed to go in, right? So I'm getting ready to go in for heart surgery to have my mitral valve repaired, and she's not allowed to go into the hospital. She dropped me off at the front door of the hospital, and I had to go in. She went to a hotel and spent the night because the operation was the next morning. And so she went to a hotel, spent the night, and she spent the day in the hotel with my oldest daughters and stuff, and they were just sitting there praying and hoping things were going well because they didn't really know. Right? And then they finally got the call after the surgery that things went well, and she was able to go home, and I was in there for like another 4 days, and she was not allowed to come see me at all until the entire thing was completely over, and I was finally able to leave the hospital, and they wheeled me on a wheelchair to meet her in the car. And I remember going through that and going through those doors at first, and I'm just like, whew, like this isn't cool. I'm completely by myself. I don't know anybody in this whole place. I am all by myself. And I got this issue with my heart, and I'm going to be having a heart surgery. Like, that's like, wow, I'm trying to wrap my mind around that. And I'm like, but you know what? The whole time, I had to keep reminding myself My God is able, right? He's able to bring me through this. He didn't bring me this far, to just give up on me now. And even if something goes wrong on that operating table, I know where I'm going to be because I've put my faith and trust in him, right? And so that gave me a peace about it, to where I was able to go in there and be like, okay, I'm just gonna have peace with this, right? I'm just gonna let the doctors do what they got to do, and I'm gonna pray for the best, and that's all I can do, and just know that my God is able. But I still had to go through it, right? I still had to go through that, and so no matter what we face, we need to remind ourselves at times that my God is able. But what if our God is able, but he doesn't? What if our God is able, but he doesn't? We're like, I know he's able to do this, but he's not doing it. What do we do then, right? What if we can believe that he will, but he doesn't? We see the boys in this story face that very real possibility in verse 18. Because in verse 18, starting in the middle of 17, it says, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it. They got faith, right? They believe that. They absolutely believe that. And he will deliver us from your majesty's hands. They're making this claim to the king, right? And they're saying, he can deliver us from this, and he's going to deliver us from your hand. When you see that, he will deliver us from your hand, I think there's two different meanings for that. I think there's two different ways this go. Either way, we're delivered from your hand, right? Like, we're either not going to be here with you anymore, or he's going to really come through for us, right? And verse 18 says this, but even if he does not, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up. We want you to know that even if he does not, right? When you're facing a fiery trial and you're asking God to deliver you, maybe one of the greatest statements of faith that you could ever say, that you could ever make is, God, I believe you can. God, I believe you can. God, I believe you will. God, but even if you don't, I still believe. Right? I still believe. Even if you don't, I still believe. Now the king, right, when he hears this, he didn't take it very lightly, right? I think he's still furious with these guys. He's still a little upset. And what's he do? He heats the furnace up 7 times hotter because he's ticked, right? He's mad. And he's like, he's not just little mad, he's big mad, right? He's like, I'm heating this sucker up. Let's get this thing going 7 times hotter. Like, I want to make sure they're dead in an instant, right? Like, that's what he's doing. He gets things so hot, and then he orders the strongest soldiers, whatever, to tie the 3 boys up, right? To tie them up, and the soldiers tells them to take them up and throw them in the furnace. So they take them up there, these 3 boys, and they throw them into the furnace. But when they did that, the flames were so hot and the furnace was so hot because they had jacked it up so much that the soldiers were killed when they were throwing the boys into the fire. It was that hot. Can you imagine? Can you imagine that? Like, that hot. Like, he's that mad that he's got it going that hot. That thing was probably glowing red. You know what I mean? This furnace was probably like a bright red from all the heat and stuff. And they're going up there and he throws them in. And they die. The soldiers die just throwing them in. And then what's really cool is then King Nebuchadnezzar, he looked on and he was shocked at what he saw, right? He's shocked at what he's seeing, because then he says this, he shouted, didn't we throw 3 men into the fire? Right? Like, didn't we throw 3 guys in there? And his people are all like, yep, 3 guys. That's it, just 3. He's like, and then we read this. He says this, look, he answered, I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they are not hurt. And the form of the 4th is like the Son of God. He's like, what is going on here, right? This story just got really crazy. This story got really crazy. There were 3 men thrown into the fire, and now there's a 4th man in the fire with them. The soldiers died just throwing them in. And then he's seeing these guys walking loose in the fire. Crazy, right? So who's the 4th man? Who's the 4th man in the fire? Like, where did he come from? Like, what? I'm sure King Nebuchadnezzar's like, there's somebody else there, but he says it looks like the form of the Son of God. Like, that's just crazy. Scholars tell us that the 4th man was most likely Jesus, right? That's what they believe, right? They most likely was Jesus, and they call it a Christophany, They call it a Christophany, and in the Christophany, this word, what it really means, the first part, Christ, means Jesus. Pretty easy, right? That part's pretty easy. The second part, ophany, means appearance, right? So it's Jesus' appearance. It's the appearance of Jesus. And they would say that this was an Old Testament appearance of Christ. This was an Old Testament appearance of Christ. You're like, how could that be? Well, here's the thing. God has always been 3 in 1. Right? He's always been 3 in 1. God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit. He always has been. He always will be. Right? And so Jesus has been there from the very beginning. When we read Scripture and we look at Genesis 1, like we know that Jesus has been there from the very beginning. He's always been part of all of that. Right? And so he is part of the Trinity. He's always existed as part of that Trinity. So scholars call this the pre-incarnate visitation of Jesus. It's pretty amazing when you think about it. Right? It's pretty amazing, and this takes this story to a whole new level, right? It takes this story to an entire new level, because here's the thing. Jesus literally met them in the fire. Jesus literally met them in the fire. That is so powerful, because here's the thing. Fast forward to the end of the story. Scripture tells us that the boys miraculously survive, that there's no harm on their bodies. In fact, it says they don't even smell like smoke, right? Like you come out of a blazing furnace like that and you don't even smell like smoke. That's crazy, right? That's miraculous. I don't know how that even happens. How good is our God? How good is our God that, right, that he can bring us through a trial like that and we won't even smell like smoke. The flames won't even touch us. He can bring us through a trial. How amazing is God that he can bring you through a trial like that and the flames won't even touch you and you won't even smell like smoke. It's amazing to think about. It's amazing to think about how amazing God is. The next thing you know, King Nebuchadnezzar, right, who resented these boys' faith in God, promotes these boys. He promotes them and decided on the spot to put his faith in their God. That's pretty amazing, right? Daniel 3:28 says, Then Nebuchadnezzar said, "Praise be to the God of Shadrach and Benny, who has sent his angel and rescued his servants. They trusted in him and defied the king's command and were willing to give up their lives rather than serve or worship any other god except their own God." He says, praise be to the God of Shadrach and Benny. Like he's like, I'm praising your God because that's amazing. And in the moment, he then puts his faith and trust in Jesus, in God. At that moment, he's like, that's amazing. Your God is real. That's crazy, right? Here's the thing. Now, here's what I want us to notice. I want us to really look at this and think about this, because there's something I think we need to notice of what really happened, what he did and what he didn't do. What God did and what God didn't do in this situation, all right? Notice, when did God deliver the boys? When did he deliver the boys? In the fire, right? He delivered them in the fire. God didn't deliver them from the fire. He didn't send a giant rainstorm to like flood the furnace or whatever and put the fire out so that Nebuchadnezzar goes, "Oh, whoa, your God's amazing. Look at what he did. Like he put the fire out to save you guys. That's really cool." Like, could he have done that? Absolutely. He could have done something like that. I'm sure of it. He could have caused the whole thing to just blow up or whatever. I don't know. The guy got it 7 times hotter. It probably should have blown up. But he doesn't do that. He doesn't save them from the fire. He delivers them in the fire. In the middle of the fire. Right? It's so important that we understand and embrace this truth, right? God doesn't always deliver us from our trials. He doesn't always deliver us from our trials, but he is always with us in our trials. He's always with us in our trials, whatever it is we're going through. In the middle of their worst trial, Jesus met them in the fire. He met them in the fire. Maybe you're going through a difficult season, right? Maybe there's something going on in your life. Maybe there's something that you're struggling with or whatever. And you're just like, what I hope that you see is that when you put your faith and trust in God, Jesus will always meet you in the fire. He will always meet you in the fire. He is always with you, right? Think about these boys. Think about these boys and what happened to them when they got thrown into this fire, and all of a sudden they're up walking around, and there's a 4th guy in there with them. I always think about, like, what would that have been like? Like, what would that really have been like to be like, I'm certain as they were being brought up to the thing, they're like, all right, boys, we doing this? Like, we really doing this, right? Like, here we go. Like, they're going to throw us in any second. We're almost dead. And then we get to the edge and they're getting thrown in. They're going, okay, we're dead, right? I don't believe for a second that they thought that once they got thrown into that fire that they were going to be walking around inside the fire. I don't think that ever occurred to them. I really don't. I think they were probably going, well, guys, we said that even if he doesn't deliver us, we're still going to believe, right? Like, they're being thrown into this fire. I can just imagine, what was that like when they're walking around inside the fire? It says, I see them walking loose inside the fire. And I'm like, that would have been amazing to be like, all of a sudden, like, there's Jesus standing in front of you in the middle of the fire. And I just wonder if he said anything to them. You ever think about that? Like, did he say anything to them while they're walking around inside the fire? A little fireside chat, a little hotter than usual, but like they're having, what would that have been like? They're in the middle of this fire. I wonder, did he tell them like, your Heavenly Father's proud of you. Your Heavenly Father's proud of you. You trusted him and you stood strong. He's proud of you. Or because of your faith, King Nebuchadnezzar, that guy standing right out there, is looking in, he's going to come to know your God in a big way because of what you guys did. Right? Or because of your faith, your names will be remembered for generations and generations, for such a long time. And people, when they're going through really, really difficult times in their lives, they'll be able to look at your story and understand that God is with them. I wonder if he told them any of that. I don't know. I just wonder what that might have looked like, right? The fiery furnace looked like the end of their lives. I'm certain that they thought it was going to be the end of their lives as they're being thrown into the fire. Right? It looked like the end of their lives, but it turned out that is the place where they came face to face with Jesus. It's pretty amazing. They came face to face with Jesus in the fire. Here's the thing, that's a hope that we can hold on to today. That's a hope that we can hold on to no matter what we're going through, no matter what we're facing, that even in the fire, he is right there with us. Right? No matter what we're going through, Jesus will meet us in the fire. Jesus tells you that he loves you in the middle of the fire. I believe that he does. I believe that he'll tell you that he loves you, that he's proud of you, and that he won't leave you. If you're standing firm for him in your trials, I believe he's going to tell you that. and when I say he'll never leave you, why is that? Well, because Jesus is always with you. Scripture says he will never leave you nor forsake you, right? He's always there with you. He's going to be in that fire, walking around with you in the fire. He may not save you from the fire. And I think there's a lot of people who put their faith and trust in Jesus, and they say they're believers, and I think they truly think they are sometimes, until I think there are people that they get into this situation and the fire looks a little too hot. The flames are getting a little too close. They're starting to feel the heat, and their faith falls apart. Right? Their faith just falls apart, and because they forget that their God is able to bring them through the fire, and that he may not save them from the fire, right? That he doesn't always deliver us from our trials, but they forget that he will always be with us in our trials. And when you focus on that and you remember that, it makes it so much easier to go through those things that you have ahead of you. To remember that Jesus is always with us for that. He's always with you. He's with you now, right? He's with us right now. And Jesus will meet you in the fire. Whatever fire that is in your life, whatever you're going through, whatever challenge it is you have in your life, whether it's sickness, whether it's, whatever, whether it's just financial burdens, whether it's, whatever it is, whatever fire it is you're going through, whatever challenge you have in your life today, he's going to meet you in the fire. And he's going to walk with you right through it. And when you come out the other side, if you've kept your faith and trust in him, you're going to walk out not even smelling like smoke. Pretty amazing. But even if he doesn't save you from the fire, even if he doesn't bring you through that, what's the worst that's going to happen? You're going to be with Jesus in heaven, right? That's the worst case scenario for pretty much any scenario you can come up with, right? If you have your faith and trust in him, that you're going to end up in heaven with Jesus one day. That's it. That's amazing. I guarantee you, when you get there, you're not going to smell like smoke, right? Pretty amazing. Pretty amazing to think about. We serve an amazing God who is always with us and who will walk through the fire with us. Let's pray. Father, I pray that you would just be with us this morning as we think through these things and we talk about, as we talked about how you're there even in the fire, Father, and how you don't always save us from the fire, but you join us and you walk right through it with us. And I pray, Father, that you would help us to remember that. And when we're going through those difficult times, I pray that you would help us to stand firm in our faith and not compromise, right? To not compromise our faith in a world that compromises on so much. And Father, I pray that you would help us to stay strong in our faith. And I pray that people around us would see that they would begin to see our lives and how we live them and the way we go through trials and tribulations and things like that, Father. And I pray that you would help them to see that and wonder why we do that and how we can have such faith and hope and trust in a situation like that. And I pray that that opens up doors to be able to share the love of Christ with every single person around us so that they can then also have a relationship with him and have somebody to walk through the fires with them. Father, I pray for each and every person here that if they're going through anything, Father, I pray that you would give them comfort and peace and allow them to know that you are truly with them, walking through the fire with them today, right now. Father, these things I ask in your name. Amen.